alaikum. Friends, we are gathered here to discuss and exchange thoughts about Islam and how it functions in the United States, Islam and pluralism. I'll keep the introduction short because we have many topics to cover. The program is 3 segments. First segment is about Islam and pluralism. And the second segment is how do we create an open community while following religion. The third segment is why are religious people not confident about their own faith. Each segment is roughly 1 hour or 45 minutes. In the first 20 minutes, each one of us will give a presentation and followed by in 5 or 10 minutes commentary from Imam Sahab and Adam Rashid, and then for the next 20 minutes will be open question and answers. All questions are open and you can ask any question. And I hope this discussion becomes meaningful to those who are watching us on the video. And we're not giving any answers. It's a discussion that we want you to carry forward and learn and share with us. Together we all can discuss and learn a lot more. Thank you very much. Now we're going to go with the brief introductions. Imam Sahab.
My name is Zia ul Haq Sheikh, and I'm the Imam at the Islamic Center of Irving, a suburb of Dallas, Texas. I've been in the United States since the end of 1995. I originate from the Pakistani side of Kashmir. I was born there. I was raised in England, and I stayed there, did all my studies there until I finally came to the US in 1995, where I have been since, and I have a wife and 2 kids.
Let me add to that. He is one of the most respected imams for me personally. There are very few imams who truly understand Islam in its entirety. And he understands when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ operated in a society where Jews, Christians and everyone lived together. And whatever he said was sensitive and respectful and pluralistic. And Imam Zia is one of the few imams that I know who understands that very well. And he has been involved in many interfaith dialogues in Dallas, non-stop, and he has been part of many of the events. And I salute you, Imam, for being the true Imam for us here in Dallas.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mona Kazim Shah. I am a physician by training and a journalist by practice. I am a full-time journalist and activist out of Dallas area. And my focus is terrorism and counter-terrorism, minority rights in Pakistan. I'm also an op-ed fellow, 2014, and I am working on 2 documentary films on gender rights and drone attacks in Pakistan. I'm a mother of twin girls, and I live in Dallas.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mozum Sayed. I came to this country in 1975, basically a professional engineer at a nuclear power plant. I've been involved with mosques and various political or activism related issues since 1985. And here again I'm a volunteer to whatever cause may arise for Muslim community.
My name is Dr. Amir Suleiman. I'm an electrophysiologist, meaning I'm a cardiologist who specializes in rhythms of the heart. I also have a bachelor's in journalism and history, and I just like academic discussions regarding Islam, and a little bit opinionated, as you will notice.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sana Anwar. I went to UT Austin for my undergraduate degree in Middle Eastern Studies and Communications, and right now I'm getting my master's in Global Comm in DC. I'm super proud of being a Muslim American of Pakistani descent, and I hope inshallah to be able to represent all 3 identities in whatever career path I choose.
Good evening and Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Khwaja Nauman Anwar, originally from Pakistan. Have been in the United States since 1976 and a citizen since 1981. I'm a physician. I practice in Artesia, New Mexico at this time, and I try to be active in various Muslim and Islamic issues as well as issues of common interest at large. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Adam Rashid. My background is mostly in religious studies as well as Islamic sciences. Born and raised here in the United States, but spent a lot of time overseas as well. My focus is primarily around the Quran, studying it, and discussing it within the context that we live in, within, of course, our current modern time. I'm based in Chicago, but I'm here for a visit, and Mike was kind enough to invite me to this discussion.
My name is Mike Gauss. I must say, I was a Muslim, born, raised Muslim, then went out of the fold, then became Muslim again. And I'm very proud of being a Muslim. And my focus is pluralism in Islam. I see Islam as a pluralistic deen, and that is all-inclusive. In a few words, when we start with Rabbul Alameen, with Allah, and Rahmatul Alameen, I would say Makhlukul Alameen, we belong to the whole nations, whole communities, and that has been my focus. And I have taken up many challenges in the last few years. One of them was Pastor Roberts here in Dallas, and he challenged Quran, and we did a Quran conference with 10 pastors, clergy from different faiths, including Imam Zia Sheikh. And then I took up with the Quran burning incident. Inshallah, we're making a film about that in Florida. Then we had conferences on Sharia and others, and also have held 2 conferences intra-faith, that is within the faith, Shia Sunni. Once we did at the Rice University, and inshallah we'll be doing one at the Harvard University. And the Qadar Foundation has also invited to do a talk on bridging the gap between Shia and Sunni. And alhamdulillah, the university in Qom has invited me to go study a 2 weeks intensive course on Shia theology. I'll hope to learn that as well. And I'm self-taught. I believe people always ask, what is your qualification? My qualification is what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said. Every Muslim has a responsibility to read and learn Quran and see its value and propagate the true values, and that's what I am. Thank you very much, and now we'll begin the program. Assalamu alaikum. We are gathered here to have discussions on Islam and different issues, and these are merely discussions. We hope you, the person watching this, also carries these discussions, and these are not conclusions but merely discussions. We want you to discuss and broaden your own knowledge and share that with us. Now we have Imam Zia Sheikh is going to talk about why are religious people not confident about their faith today. As a way of introduction, let me mention the little story. About 5 years ago, a pastor challenged Quran, and we asked him to come and be a part of the discussion, which he did not agree. But it was on the NBC TV, it was on Fox News, it was also in Dallas Morning News. I gave a challenge to the pastor. Find me 5 mistakes in Quran that you and I agree in public. If you do that, I will become a Christian in your sanctuary. If not, I want you to become a peacemaker. He didn't take that challenge up. Then we threw the same challenge with the Quran burning pastor in Florida. He didn't take that up. When you throw this challenge to anybody with confidence, they will run, because you cannot find faults with Quran. The point I wanted to make here was, there were 2 imams here in Dallas, and they said, why did you take the challenge? What will you do if they find the fault? And I said, Imam Sahib, you have not read Quran. You should have faith and confidence in Quran to boldly say this. So with that, now I pass it on to Imam Zia Sheikh.
Well, the third discussion that we're going to have is, why are religious people not confident about their faith today? Is it culture or is it conviction? And surprisingly, a lot of this is going to be intertwined with the issue that was discussed in the last session, which was the mixture of culture that we've had, that many people culturally practice Islam, coming from a Muslim background or being born into a Muslim household. And then when that faith that they've learned over the years or they've practiced over the years, it becomes part of them and it comes under criticism, then they have no response to it. They have no response to it because they have not known the wisdom behind it. They have not understood what they're practicing to be religious or cultural. They just mix everything up in the same batch of things, and they mix up Islam with religion. So the critics of Islam basically have a field day, and they use this opportunity to confuse Muslims even further. So let us take an example, for example, culture versus Islam, which are usually propagated by the critics of Islam as being Islamic things. And again, when people hear that and they say, well, I've seen this being practiced, so it must be Islam. Let's say, for example, honor killings. Honor killings, which are prevalent in many cultures, not just Islamic cultures. Hindus and Sikhs and other cultures have practiced honor killings. They are not anything related to do with Islam, but just because they are culturally practiced, they are equated with Islam. And unfortunately, people assume, because of their lack of knowledge, Muslims also assume that it must be part of Islam, that's why people are doing it. The second thing, for example, forced marriage. Okay? People don't realize that Islamically a woman has a right to refuse any proposal that is given to her, any proposal that is provided by her parents. There is a very clear incident about a woman who said and complained to the Prophet ﷺ that my father married me off while I was young, and now it's time for me to consummate that marriage, but I don't want to be with this person, so what should I do? The Prophet ﷺ said that you have the right to divorce this person. The woman then said, I will accept what my father has dedicated for me as a husband, but I only wanted to make a point that the marriage cannot be forced upon a girl. Okay, so there's a very clear hadith which says that. So forced marriages are not Islamic, but they are equated with Islam because Muslims practice that quite prevalently. And then that very prevalent thing that comes up all the time is the issue of the female genital mutilation. Okay, that's touted, and part of the problem is people like the Somali woman Ayaan Ali Hirsi. It's touted as being an Islamic practice, whereas it's not an Islamic practice. It's a sub-Saharan African practice, practiced by African Christians and people who live in the areas of Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia. Whether they are Muslims or not, it is practiced by all of these cultures, and it's not an Islamic practice. And there's often a hadith which is misquoted and misunderstood, which talks about the cutting of the part of the genitals, which is not a correct understanding of what female circumcision is. There's female genital mutilation as opposed to female circumcision, and circumcision is just a small cut which cuts off the fold of the clitoris, the outer fold of the clitoris, which actually many women have an issue when they are having intercourse, that the engorgement of the clitoris with blood actually makes intercourse difficult for them and uncomfortable for them, and making that circumcision actually makes it easy for them. And this is actually a Western practice. It is practiced in the West. It is known as clitoridectomy, as far as, and doctor can correct me later on if I'm getting the wrong terminology. So this practice is not an Islamic practice, but it is touted as being an Islamic practice. And then the most famous one is the driving in Saudi Arabia, as if the laws of Saudi Arabia somehow become the flag bearers for the whole Islamic Ummah, where the whole Muslim world actually, the women drive cars, and yet the Saudi issue is just put at the forefront to make it look like, women are so oppressed that they're not even allowed to drive. So These cultural practices are often equated with Islam, and this is something that confuses Muslims because of their lack of knowledge about Islam in the first place. There are also social issues that are touted as being Islamic. The stoning to death is often touted as being an Islamic practice where, yes, there is an Islamic practice, but it comes with rules and regulations. And people don't realize that it is not something that can easily be implemented. For that practice to be done, you have to have 4 witnesses. Who in their right state of mind commits adultery in front of 4 witnesses? It's impossible to do. Or the person himself goes to the court and he actually admits 4 times in front of a judge that I've committed adultery, give me the punishment, then that punishment will be implemented. And then on top of that, to kind of equate and keep a balance, Sharia also says that people who make this kind of accusation against an adulterer, if they are found to be false, or if they cannot bring 4 witnesses, they themselves will be given 80 lashes. So there's kind of like a deterrent for people to even come forward and testify that what if I can't find 4 witnesses? What if I'm found to be untruthful? I'm going to get 80 lashes. So the concept of the stoning of death is put out there, but how it comes into practice is something that people don't realize, that it's so difficult. And even it's mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to, when people used to come to him to admit in public that they've committed adultery, he used to turn away from them and not pay attention to them, or even have them thrown out of the masjid. So that shows that the purpose is not the stoning to death. The purpose is to make sure that society is clean and people don't practice these things in a way that the society becomes filthy and polluted with these kinds of things, as we see in many Western environments. I don't want to go on too long about these issues, so I'll just go on to the next subject, which is the issue of history. And history being portrayed in such a way that it seems like Islam has been the responsible party for many of history's ills throughout the decades and the years. For example, many people, they say that the Muslims colluded with Nazis in the Second World War, which couldn't be further from the truth. We look at the colonial powers and how many Muslims, they fought for the colonial powers, for the Allied forces, not only in the Second World War, but also in the First World War, many losing their lives. There's actually a movie which I hope that people can see. It's called Days of Glory. It's a French movie, and it was about North African Muslims that enrolled and fought for the French against the Nazis in the Second World War, and how they were underappreciated for doing that. And then there's the story of Noor Inayat Khan. Actually, recently, a movie was put out on PBS, very fascinating movie, about this woman who was from a Sufi background. Her father was a Sufi saint who had many followers. This woman, she was raised in France and actually fought for the Allied forces. She became a spy for the Allied forces. She was parachuted into France from England, and she used to send messages back to the Allied forces, and then ultimately she lost her life. I actually wrote about her in my book. The book is called
What's her name?
Noor Inayat Khan.
There's a film about it.
There's a movie about it, a documentary. And I mentioned her in my book, which is called Islam Silencing the Critics, even 2 or 3 years before the movie came out. We look at the history of Palestine, for example. There is a conscious effort by the critics of Islam to portray Palestine as being a non-existent entity prior to 1948. The effort is to portray it in such a way that it was just a barren piece of land, and what happened was in 1948, civilized people came and made it what it is today, a modern area which everybody wants to go to. Reality is Muslims have been there for thousands of years, but the effort is to kind of taint history to make it look like that Palestine didn't even exist before that. Then there are false accusations against the Prophet, which we discussed earlier, fabricated stories, and using the Sirah books as a reference, using non-authentic sources as a reference to make it look like, look, this is in your books, and I've quoted from your books, so how can you answer that? Again, people who have a lack of knowledge and don't realize that sometimes the Sirah books have unauthenticated stories in them and unverified stories in them. They become confused and they think that, this is my religion teaching this, this must be a fault of the religion, and that's why they become confused. And finally, I just want to talk about the issue of the magnified threat of terrorism. And this is something that I refer to as the airplane crashing syndrome. Okay, we look at, unfortunately, we had an event yesterday of this plane that's disappeared, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes things easy for the relatives of the deceased. But we have seen since that time that the news channels, 24 hours, they're basically just circulating the same thing over and over again. And it makes it look like, aircraft travel is the most dangerous thing ever. Statistically, however, we find we have maybe a couple of airplane crashes every couple of years in which 200 or 300 people die. The reality is that 50,000 people, they die in road accidents every single year, just in America. Forget about the whole world. So the magnified exposure to these kinds of incidents, they make it look like it's just a horrific thing. It is a horrific thing, but it makes it look like that every time you step on a plane, it might go down, and it scares the heck out of people, and they don't want to fly anymore. But the same thing has actually been used to magnify the threat of terrorism in our society, that it seems like around every corner there's a terrorist lurking, waiting to kill us. More likely than being killed by a terrorist attack, we are more likely to be killed by lightning. But the reality is the magnified threat and the exposure and the news cycles and the funding that Homeland Security gets and all the agencies get and all the new agencies that are formulated and the so-called sting operations and the things that we've seen throughout the post 9/11 years, it makes it look like we are constantly under the threat of terrorism, but the reality is that it's not the case. Of course, we should always be vigilant, and we should, as Muslims living in Islamic communities, make sure that nobody from our midst is heading in that direction and becoming an extremist. And I'm sure that the people seated around this table and our communities would be the first to step forward and report such people to authorities. But at the same time, we don't see that happening. But it's magnified to such a degree that Muslims, they feel guilty. And Muslims are made to feel guilty every time an incident takes place. And we are asked, why aren't you condemning? Even though we condemn, and organizations condemn, but the same question is portrayed all the time to us. And again, when we hear that again and again, it's been beaten into us, then the result of that is that, especially the younger people, they get confused into thinking that, hey, am I practicing the right religion or not? And again, like I said earlier, it's all intertwined with practicing religion as a culture, not differentiating between culture and Islam, not educating ourselves between the wisdoms of our religion, the reality of our religion, what is Islam, what is culture, understanding the difference between the two. And if we had that, then there would be less confusion. I'll open the floor for any comments.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Actually, these are the things of female genital mutilation, honor killing, forced marriage. These are the things that shake the confidence of Muslims. Like the Imam concluded, am I following the right religion? Is this what Islam is all about? So the lack of confidence or lower confidence comes from these things thrown at us constantly. And I think as as a group of Muslims, we need to have confidence in ourselves. How do we do with it? Raza Aslam had addressed those two issues of FGM very well, and that video has gone viral, and I'm glad he did that. On honor killing, if you Google it, Haryana has got more honor killing than any other place. On Hannity show and also on Megyn Kelly, I was on both the shows about that Oklahoma employee killing. And of course I did not get to communicate everything I wanted to, but what the point I made that was, on the same day, Google it. Anytime anybody makes a comment, Google it. I'm asking Muslims and non-Muslims alike to Google the incident, employee killing fellow employees. There were 6 people killed on the exact same day, 3 in Alabama and 3 elsewhere. And I jumped on Megyn and said, why you pick this as Muslim whereas the others are killed? It may not change the entire world, but it gives them, those people who are sitting on the fence, said, he's right. There were 6 people killed, why are we picking on Muslim and not others? The other incident with Hannity was, Imam Sahib, I don't think I told you this. This needs to be told. Hannity calls a meeting called a retreat once a year. That was last February 2013. 25 people. Peter King, the Homeland Security Chief, John Bolton, this guy from here, Texas, they were all there. It's basically mix and mingle. I was the only Muslim and only moderate person in that group of 25. What I'm about to share is a very critical moment, how we engage and change things. Out of nowhere, people were sitting on the bleachers, Hannity called in and said, Mike, come on, sit with me. I went and sat with him. He says, I'm going to cut it short. I want to do something for you. Would you be happy with it? I said, tell me what? I said, would you be happy? I said, first tell me what is that you want to do. And he says, look, Mike, for the last 10 years, I've been trying to have a dialogue with Muslims. They run away from me. I cannot dialogue with them. Then of course I told him, Shan, the way you talk, nobody wants to talk with
He
you.
ran away.
You need to change that. Then he asked, why are you with me here? He says, because I have a hope that I can make a few points with you and hope you can see another part of you. And then he said, this is exactly what I want to do for you. And I said, what? He said, you are the only Muslim I know that I can talk to. What I talk is not pleasant to you, but you still listen to me, then you give me your point of view. And I can dialogue with you. I cannot find Muslims who I can dialogue with you. For this, I want to reward you. I said, what? And all the other guys were watching on the outside. He said, you've been asking me for the last 4 years not to use the word Muslim terrorist, Islamic terrorism, and instead you asked me to say terrorists among Muslims, terrorists in Islam. From this day forward, I'm going to reward you with that. Would they be happy with it? I stood up and saluted him. It's worth my time for doing this. And what happened after that is important. Everybody clapped, including Peter King. 40 days later, on April 15, Boston Marathon bombing happened. CNN camera goes on this chairman of the Homeland Security, Peter King. Peter King tells, 96% of Muslims are fine people. It's the 4% we need to worry about it. The very same man, before he met Hannity, before he clapped, 6 months before that time, he had said, every mosque needs to be tapped. This is the Homeland Security telling. And every Muslim needs to be investigated. Look at the dramatic change. And I was told by many of Muslim friends, don't go on Hannity. And they said all kinds of things. Then I said, Mother Teresa had said, if you want to make peace with your enemy, go talk with them. You don't talk with your friends to make peace. Following that formula of Mother Teresa, it worked with Hannity. He is one of the most hated guys, but deep down, he is amenable. What he did for Muslims is a great thing. I just wanted to share that. And that gives me confidence as a Muslim to go on any show in the world and talk confidently about Islam, because the problem is not Islam, some Muslims, just as in other people. So that's what I wanted to share, and I wanted you to know this story. And this is also going to be in the film we are making.
I was surprised to hear Peter King, what he said that day.
It is Hannity's,
Yeah.
what Hannity did to him.
Yeah. And Peter King is, I think he was going to visit a mosque now. You know, he
Good for him.
That's right.
I'm going to go see him. We're doing a Holocaust event on January 27th in DC. I'm going to invite him.
Great, good job. This is Khwaja Anwar again. So we are addressing why are religious people not confident about their faith today. I would say religious people with the knowledge, as the Imam Sahab mentioned, they are confident. The question to me is why Muslims at large are not confident of their faith. And the reason I agree with Imam Sahab is lack of knowledge. But the lack of knowledge is working many ways. I would suggest that the single best book I read on this is that Jeffrey Lang's book, Losing My Faith. I very strongly recommend to other parents, look at all the questions he's raising, which our children don't get answered. And to them, all the innuendo they hear is right. And they say, is this the religion?
So isn't this like an atheistic book which
No.
promotes atheism?
Jeffrey Lang is a Muslim.
Jeffrey Lang is a very
No,
good
he's saying
He's a
responding to
mathematician.
atheism. Okay,
That's what you're asking.
okay.
Yeah, he's my hero, I would say. I've met him a couple of times. Makes a lot of sense. I would say he makes more sense than most people I have talked with. Anyway, in that book he mentioned this thing that the questions he gets from the young kids about, Islam in general, theology in general, especially Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his personal life, his marriages, he said, nobody give them the answer at all. And they are on internet, they're looking at all those, bad websites which have, laughable objections to Quran, to theology or history, wrong, complete lies. That's what he says our children are reading. And they are not, like he gives an unfortunate example of the Imam in San Francisco where he was from Algeria whose one son, 16, 17-year-old, used to come with the mosque, and take part in various activities. And one day the Imam told the halakha that I have lost my son. He no longer believes in, when he refuses to come, and he had left home. He says that Imam didn't realize that it was not an Algerian child. It was an American child whose mosque culture was totally different from his school, where everything was questioned. They wanted evidence. Where did you read it? Show us the evidence. And in his mosques, you can't ask this question. This is haram. This is, who are before God? Oh, nobody knows. You don't think like that. And there are excellent answers to all these questions. For the first time, I had the best answer on Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his, marriage, especially with Hazrat Aisha. The best answer, and which will satisfy anybody. And all the questions, going back to this question again, that lack of knowledge and the questions being raised all around them by fellow students, internet, that sapping their confidence. And it is sapping their confidence to a degree that it will, Dr. Lang thinks, I hate to say it, I hope he's wrong. He doesn't think that even 20% of our children will be practicing Islam. He thinks Islam will be wiped out if we don't change. He says in his mosque in Kansas, he's a professor of mathematics in University of Kansas in Lawrence. He hardly ever sees children, adults actually, between the ages of 18 and 28, the college kids, you never see them. He says it's a college town. He says there are about 100 students, he knows who are Muslim. And it's
They're
just
not-
4 or 5
They're not
children.
convinced.
They're not convinced.
Yeah.
They have lost their way. And we have, and he said the thing is that when I talk to other imams in the mosque, they have a very nonchalant attitude because they are still getting those who are committed.
Mhm.
He said, but those who are lost, they are gone.
Yeah, it's the institutional problem we have.
Yeah.
They care only
It's a big
about.
problem, believe me, Imam Sahib, maybe you have to take some action on these things. So I don't know what the situation is here, but it can't be different than Kansas. Thank you.
So,
I'm Sana Anwar. A lot of what I wanted to address has already been addressed by everyone's great comments. But basically what I wanted to say was I agree there's a terrible mix and confusion with culture and religion, and that's just the lack of understanding, lack of critical thinking that can only be encouraged in the house and within the mosque. And I disagree with I think it's a little pessimistic what Mr. Lane has to say. Maybe I just encounter people who are very different from who he speaks about, but there are great imams and scholars that are gaining a lot of popularity now with especially my generation, and I think that's a huge thing that's happening. That's something I didn't have growing up. I had family that I could rely on. But the critical thinking becomes harder with what is happening in the media, and that's 100% our fault, in my opinion. The US media especially, it's a business, and we have great people like what you're doing and other people are doing, and I feel like we'll do those things too, inshallah, but US media is a business. Why would they want to show normal Muslims? We're boring, we're very boring, we're too normal. Obviously they're gonna show the people who are crazy. And it's on us to be better members within American society. We force our kids to become doctors. That's great. If they have an inclination to become doctors, that's great. It's a very admirable field. Lawyers, same thing. But if your child loves to write, let them go into journalism. Like, we need people, when they turn on the TV, they should be able to see a guy with the name Ahmed, and he's just talking about the news. These Muslim names, they can do other things. And that's 100% our fault. I don't know why we're always complaining about the media's representation of us when we could be doing better. And there are great journalists out there. There are Muslim journalists out there who are working hard. Non-Muslim journalists, Glenn Greenwald is like my favorite. I think he's awesome. But that's on us, in my opinion.
And I think if you look at Britain and Europe in general, you'll find that there are a lot of Muslim journalists. Raghi Yusuf, for example, and Mishal Hussain on the BBC. And recently there's another Afghani lady who's started working for the BBC too. So BBC is way ahead of us in that field. But unfortunately many people don't watch the BBC. So. Yeah, but your point is well taken, because I agree. I mean, most of us, we want our kids to just either be doctors or lawyers, and journalism is kind of like, well, if they don't make it, then, then they can do whatever they want.
Actually, I wish I had brought my daughters too. The amount of bashing my kids received at school after 9/11 was substantial. But surprisingly, God knows where they got the courage. They made a joke out of it. For instance, my daughter, she said, okay, this is your terrorist calling. So I asked, what are you talking about? So now that's how I found out how the kids managed it. It was surprisingly, but deep down they did feel the brunt. The other thing is when it comes to mosques, up to a certain age, they are like a captive audience. Parents are pushing them in and mothers are keeping them in. But when they grow up, when they are started looking for answers or questioning, one of the comment I would just like to share is at our mosque maybe, imams are limited to, I would borrow your word, on their khutbahs, relying on administrative Islam rather than the soul of Islam in view of current issues. That was something which one of my daughters, she was saying, when I go there, they come after khutbah and say, okay, this is what you are saying, this is then they come up with jokes also sometimes. But basically what, there are some khutbahs they appreciate it too. But basically they said that they don't get what they want to hear about current issues, in view of current issues. They talk about thousands of years back. That's very good. Times have changed. And one of the other comments, one of my one daughter has, she asked them, they maybe Imam Sahib would like to comment on it. They say that anytime you cite an example 1400 years back, there are people in current day who are exemplary, their performance as a Muslim are exemplary, and they are around us. Nobody quotes them. And that goes for the kids also. After that, there's one comment about things which you pointed out about Islamic practices, stoning of death, 4 witnesses. Granted, for man it may be okay, but woman who is conceived or was raped, in order for her to file the charges, they ask 4 witnesses there too.
Actually, that's not the case.
In Pakistan this is happening.
If you look at Mufti Taqi's fatwa about this issue, he says no, this is not the case for rape cases. They're not 4 witnesses required. Although this is one of the communications that we have, misinterpretations that are thrown out there to make it look like rape victims have no say. But if you read Mufti Taqi's fatwa about this issue, you will find it.
Okay,
Actually,
thank you.
according to the Quran, it's the accusers who should bring forward.
Accusers.
Yeah, the accuser. They put the law upside down,
Hmm.
not the victim. Victim is not supposed to bring forward witness.
This time we are seeing modernism, materialism, secularism. There's a lot of isms out there that are pervasive, that are really affecting the society we live in. Evolution, for example, naturalism is a very big thing that seemingly contradicts what religion says. Again, because we are mostly basing our religious life on social identity, social beliefs, social inheritance of religion, we don't equip ourselves really to understand what's going on. So when the children get older, I'll give you a really good example. I was here a few days ago. I was at a park here in Texas, a public park, and some Muslims were there praying. Some non-Muslims were observing, looking at them, and a young boy said to his father, they're praying, are they praying to God? And the father replied, no, they're praying to who they worship, Allah. He's called Allah. Look, this story or this situation to me indicated how rigid we are with our cultural understanding of how we believe. We never say the word God, although we speak English. So, the father says to the son, no, they're not praying to God. They're praying to who they worship. He's called Allah. Why does this happen? Why does this person respond in this way? We, within the Muslim culture, if you notice, they are so adamant about saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ingraining this kind of cultural inheritance of who God is in the children, so that the ones that they believe in seems to be so disconnected with the broader community and society they live in. So when they go outside and they meet with public, and they want to talk about their religious beliefs or what they understand, they're very afraid, intimidated, because they are standing upon a very cultural, established notion of what religion is. I just want to add one last thing. The institution, Islamic Muslim institutions, and the things that they really are emphasizing, what they call the ulum ad-diniya, if you pay attention to really what's in their domain, it has nothing to do really with reality. Hifz Quran, Arabic, memorizing hadith, these kinds of things. That's, they say, within the domain of Muslims and the religious culture. What's in the domain of the non-Muslim culture? Biology, chemistry, sociology, philosophy. Generally speaking, of course, there's some exceptions amongst the Muslims. Our sciences are so isolated in their thinking, not in touch with reality. The basis for how we are breeding the thinking, and the Muslims are breeding their thinking, along with not only Muslims, Christians also, if they're isolated. I understand they're isolated within this way. And also, their sciences are relegated to a very isolated cultural level of understanding.
Protectionist.
Does Hifz Quran really increase anyone's faith? Does Arabic, knowing what something means, and generally speaking, as a language, I know many Christians, they're Arabs. That doesn't mean that they will believe in Islam because they speak Arabic. We have these kinds of embedded notions in our mind that we keep repeating, thinking that the next generation, we know what's going on all over America. The Hafiz people are collapsing, the people who are memorizing and going through these ulum programs, they're collapsing because real belief is not being taught. Only cultural inheritance is being transferred. That's my understanding. We have to be careful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Imam Sahib, if you can conclude and say a dua at the end, and that dua will be placed on the videos.
Touching upon the points mentioned by Adam, the issue of mentioning God, whereas the Quran itself tells us when addressing the Christians or the people of the book, tell them that our God and your God is the same. So to use the word God, especially when addressing non-Muslims and Christians, I really don't see anything wrong with it. I think it should be encouraged, not discouraged at all. And the other thing about the sciences being very secluded, I think the issue is with our religious institutions. Because they focus on the religious texts rather than including biology and philosophy and all these other kinds of things, that exclusivity becomes a double-edged sword. And the issue really is there's so much to cover within the religious text that really there's no time left for anything else. And that's from my own experience. Yes, to have a revolutionary mindset on what is taught at these religious institutions, that is something that we need to think about and consider for the future of Islam in our country. Having said that, I'd like to thank everybody here. Thank you, Mike, for inviting us and for inviting us all. We finish with a prayer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us mercy. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك اللهم لا اله الا هو الحي القيوم الف لام ميم الله لا اله الا هو الحي القيوم وعنت الوجوه للحي القيوم لا اله الا انت سبحانك انا كنا من الظالمين والهكم اله واحد لا اله الا هو الرحمن الرحيم جزا الله عنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم بما هو اهله اللهم اهدنا واهد بنا واجعلنا سببا لمن اهتدى اللهم اهدنا واهد بنا واجعلنا سببا لمن اهتدى اللهم اهدنا واهد بنا واجعلنا سببا لمن اهتدى يا ارحم الراحمين. Please forgive our sins. Oh Allah, please forgive our shortcomings. Oh Allah, please forgive our shortness in our efforts that we made throughout the years and give us the ability to stand up and be flag bearers of what true Islam teaches and make our children also do the same thing for the future of Islam in this country. Please accept our prayers. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلق محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.